I want to show you one of my basic lesson layouts. If you'd like to see how I set the document up for this lesson, I encourage you to go and check out the other video I made, which is how to set up your lesson layout. But now that I've completed a lesson, I want to show you how my layout looks and why I do it the way that I do. First, I want to draw your attention to the fact that I have large bolded letters here in the top area, which is my title. If you teach multiple lessons or if you teach often, it's important for you to do this. And what I've found is sometimes, if I get lessons that look similar and they get in a stack of papers, it's easy to mix them up. But if I have the title tall and big and bolded out, then I'll be able to see really quickly what I'm going to teach. I have my name, I have the date that I taught this, and I'm actually going to type in the year as well here. And the reason that I do that is because you can file away your lessons and later on come back and reference them and see when was the last time I taught this. I mean, I don't want to teach the same thing over again, and sometimes when you teach a lot like I do, you forget what did I teach on before, and you can have this for your file. Also later when people come along, they can see who wrote this lesson, if they wanted to use it, or if you were ever going to publish it. That's a good thing to have. You'll notice that right under that, what I have is a purpose. I have a section that outlines for myself the purpose of the lesson I'm going to teach. It's extremely important that you be able to focus on that as you drive into your lesson and think about what is it that I'm going to be getting at. What is the point for this? And if you don't have a point for it, you can just throw the lesson out the window, because there's no reason in giving people a lot of information or just laying a bunch of verses on somebody without having a purpose for it. So go ahead and write your purpose out. You may think you know it, but you may get lost in a lesson. You may forget your thoughts, and you can come right back to the beginning and say, I got to stick with my purpose, and it'll help keep you on track. Next, I'm going to show you something that I do, which I just started doing a little bit later in my ministry as I realized how helpful it was, and that is I color code sections based on what they're for in my lesson. So here I have an intro. This is actually an activity, and the way that I know that this is going to be something that requires crowd interaction is because it's color coded in green. You'll notice that I've selected it and I've color coded the font here to be green, so that when I look down at my lesson I see that that's coming up, I realize it's going to be crowd participation time, and every crowd participation moment that I would write into a lesson is color-coded green. You could choose whatever colors you want. Obviously, colors are interchangeable, whatever you prefer. But for me, I have green, something eye-catching, something bright. Then next I have my passage. And what I do in my lessons is I copy and paste the entire passage I'm going to be reading from into my notes. A lot of people don't do that. They prefer to turn there and read it, and that's fine. One thing I want to avoid is I don't want there to be a lot of downtime while I'm speaking. I don't want people to have to be waiting on me to get to the passage. And I don't want to call on somebody else to read a passage that I can't go and see myself to ensure that they're reading in the proper place. So I just, for the sake of ease, paste the entire passage in. So this whole section is my lead-off passage that I'm going to be reading. And it takes up quite a chunk of the first side of my lesson sheet, which is okay, because if I'm going to have something taking up a lot of space for a Bible lesson, it should be Bible verses, in my opinion. Then what I'm going to have right after that is just an overview, a really concise type-up of the thought I'm going to share after having read that verse. And I've also got a definition for a word, which I'm going to be drawing from that verse. And I've taken and copied and pasted in some dictionary definitions, so I have that reference there. You'll notice it's a very short. I'll probably say a lot more than this, but you don't want to type out everything you're going to say if you're trying to keep it on one page of paper, because then you're going to end up having multiple pages and being flipping around in the middle of your lesson, which is, for me, not convenient. Maybe it works for you, I don't know. Maybe you have a notebook, but this is just the way that I lay it out. You'll also notice that in between sections I try as much as I can to space. The reason for that is because when you're in a hurry and you're speaking, your eye can get distracted, and when you look down at your sheet of paper, you don't want people waiting on you to try to re-find your place. So as much as you can do to make the different sections stand out, be it spacing, bolding, color coding, whatever can help you follow along with your own lesson, that's much better. I also have the header for each of these sections in bold. It's really simple to do, but it draws the eye there again, just something extra to keep you focused when you're teaching. In this instance, down here at the bottom, I ran out of space where if I had put another, and I'll do it just to show you, if I put another space in there, I actually run this verse over onto the top of the next page and my reference won't fit. And I don't want that. I really want everything staying on one side and not running over, so I just back that up. And then what I have is a nice neat end to my page, and I go over to the next side. As I'm getting into my lesson, I like to have some definite things that I'm going to be talking about. And here I've lined them out in a bulleted format, numbered them with indentions so that I'll be easily drawn to them and I can follow along. Now I don't have to tell people this is number 1, number 2, number 3, but what this does for me is I can keep a mental note of which one I just talked about, so when I look back down I just jump to that next number, and it's easier than trying to visually find your location in a muddled jumble of text which has no markings. So it's a real easy way to do it. And these are going to be some of my main points that I'm going to bring out and talk extensively about. This is going to be the main portion of my speaking. Right after this, I've got something else which is going to require crowd interaction. And so again, here I have color-coded it green. This just draws my eye to it. So as I'm reading through this upper part, as I'm getting to this number 4 here, in my mind I'm seeing this green and I'm thinking, okay, I've got something coming up here. And it helps me concentrate and focus on what's next in my lesson without having to stop and stare. Right following that, I have pasted in an illustration, which is actually a quote from someone. And I've noticed for myself that when I teach, illustrations come in handy at different points. I may paste this in here, but then at some point I may be speaking and come across just the right time to throw that illustration in. So instead of having to go look for it, I color code illustrations as well. And I'm going to give this one a blue coloration. So I have 3 colors now aside from the black text, and that is blue for illustrations and examples, green for crowd interaction, and red for scripture verses. This is really important to me because if there's one thing that I dislike, it's dead space, or it's an awkwardness trying to figure out where I was speaking from. And I just bump a space in between these to try to spread it out, because I've got illustration, verse, statement, verse, and then I wrap it up with a final practical application, which, by the way, skipping down to the practical application, is something I put at the end of every lesson that I teach, because really every message that I put out there, anytime I'm in front of a crowd and giving them information, it should be with the purpose of motivating them to do something with the information I gave them. And sometimes it's very helpful as a teacher, even if you think you know what you want to say, to type up what would be your practical application in simple terms. So if you could take this information you just taught and give it to them and say, okay, now that you've heard this, here's what I want you to do, what would you motivate them to do? So I'll type that in at the end so I can think to myself, this is what I want them to walk out of here with. I want them to understand this. If I have to wrap it up and sum it up, which you do want to sum it up. If you've ever done papers or been in an English class, you've probably been given the principle of you want to state your purpose at the very first, which is something I try to do here with my purpose line. And you want to reiterate your purpose in concise form at the end, so that if people just had the first or the last of your message, they could still get the point. The fact is that a lot of people do wander off in the middle of what you're teaching and lose concentration on what the topic is as you go through illustrations and other verses. And it's good to just make sure that you hit it again and make sure that you've driven the point home. Don't pass on too much information that they can't hold, and line it up in such a way that when you read it, it's going to come out cohesively. You want to look back over this and edit it as you need, and sometimes I may say, I don't have time for this. I'm going to have to cut this out of my lesson plan. Sometimes I'll find that while I'm teaching, I had too many things in here, and you know what, I'm just going to have to skip down to the next one. But it's better to be more prepared and to have more illustrations and more activities than you need than to get up there and think things were a little dry or bland because I can't remember what I was going to say. I had an illustration, but I didn't write it down. Don't get stuck in that situation. Make sure that you do list it all down. It's very important that when people hear you, you come across as if you know what you're talking about, and you've put it together in a good and strong, organized manner. There's nothing better for that than your notes. So I hope this helps you out with a little bit. This is just the way I do it. Of course, you can lay it out different ways. If you want to color code things differently, you can. You can put different fonts, but I just found this is the easiest, fastest, efficient way for me. And I can just open this up and replace the information with the following week's lesson, and I have a template here. I have already set up with the font size and the colors I want, and I'll keep this general layout for almost every lesson that I do to make sure that I keep parts of what I've done here into every lesson, and make sure that they all should have a practical application, a purpose, obviously a Bible passage, and probably an illustration. So I can just paste in my new lesson over my old template, and there you go. I never have to set the document up, and I have it set.